From the humble Willys Jeep to the mighty M26 Pershing, American ground forces deployed an extraordinary arsenal during World War II. The United States transformed from a modest military vehicle producer in 1940 to manufacturing millions of tanks, trucks, and specialized machines by 1945. American factories outproduced all Axis nations combined, equipping not only their own forces but allied armies worldwide through Lend-Lease. This comprehensive catalog examines every significant American vehicle that saw combat service across Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. We begin with light tanks. The M3 Stuart, nicknamed the Honey by British crews, was America's first mass-produced light tank entering service in 1941. Armed with a 37mm gun and weighing 14 tons, it saw action across all theaters. Over 13,000 were built despite increasingly vulnerable armor against German weapons. The M5 Stuart replaced the M3's radial engine with twin Cadillac V8s in 1942, dramatically improving reliability. Retaining the 37mm gun with a redesigned hull, it proved more maintainable than its predecessor. Over 8,800 were produced, serving primarily in reconnaissance through war's end. The M22 Locust was designed as an air-transportable light tank for airborne operations. Weighing only 7.4 tons with a 37mm gun, it fit inside British Hamilcar gliders. Just 830 were produced, seeing limited combat during the Rhine crossing in March 1945. The M24 Chaffee represented a significant upgrade when introduced in late 1944. Its 75mm gun matched the original Sherman's firepower while weighing only 18 tons with improved mobility. Approximately 4,700 were produced, arriving too late for extensive combat but proving highly capable. Moving on to medium tanks, the backbone of American armored forces. The M2 medium tank was America's standard medium when war began, though already obsolete. Weighing 18 tons with a 37mm gun and multiple machine guns in a riveted hull, fewer than 100 were built before production shifted to superior designs. The M3 Lee, called the Grant by British forces, was rushed into production in 1941 as a stopgap design. Mounting a 75mm sponson gun and 37mm turret gun, its tall profile made it vulnerable. Over 6,200 were built before the Sherman replaced it. The M4 Sherman became the most iconic American tank after entering service in 1942. Armed with a 75mm gun and weighing 30 tons, it balanced firepower, mobility, and reliability effectively. Nearly 50,000 were produced across all variants, serving on every front worldwide. The M4A1 featured a distinctive cast hull rather than welded construction, offering improved protection. Powered by a Continental radial engine, it retained standard 75mm armament. Approximately 6,200 were manufactured, with many serving in Marine Corps units during Pacific campaigns. The M4A2 was powered by twin General Motors diesel engines, simplifying logistics in certain theaters. Most were sent to Soviet forces through Lend-Lease or used by Marine Corps units requiring diesel compatibility. Over 8,000 were produced with excellent reliability. The M4A3 became the preferred Army variant with its reliable Ford GAA V8 gasoline engine. Entering frontline service in 1944, it offered superior power and improved serviceability over earlier models. Over 11,000 were built, forming the core of American armored units in Europe. The M4A4 used the Chrysler A57 multibank engine combining 5 automobile engines into one powerplant. The lengthened hull required an extra road wheel per side for proper weight distribution. Over 7,400 were produced, primarily supplied to British Commonwealth forces. The M4A3E8, nicknamed the Easy 8, introduced horizontal volute spring suspension for dramatically improved cross-country performance. Armed with the high-velocity 76mm gun, it represented the ultimate wartime Sherman. Entering service in late 1944, it proved highly effective against German armor. The M4A3E2 Jumbo was a heavily armored assault variant designed to lead breakthrough attacks. Frontal armor reached 152mm, approaching Tiger tank protection levels. Only 254 were produced, serving as spearhead tanks leading armored columns against fortified German positions. Continuing with heavy tanks. The M6 heavy tank was America's first heavy tank design, weighing 57 tons with a 76mm main gun and 37mm coaxial weapon. Developed from 1940, only 40 were produced as the Army deemed heavy tanks logistically impractical. None saw combat. The M26 Pershing finally gave American forces a tank capable of engaging German heavy armor equally. Its 90mm gun could penetrate Panther and Tiger armor at combat ranges. Weighing 41 tons, approximately 2,200 were produced with limited but successful combat in early 1945. Moving on to tank destroyers. The M3 gun motor carriage was America's first tank destroyer, mounting a 75mm gun on an M3 half-track. Rushed to the Philippines in 1941, its open design left crews dangerously exposed. Over 2,200 were built before proper tank destroyer designs entered production. The M10 Wolverine entered service in 1942 with a 3-inch gun in an open-top turret on Sherman running gear. Weighing 30 tons with sloped armor, it destroyed most German medium tanks effectively. Over 6,700 were produced for American and Allied forces worldwide. The M18 Hellcat was the fastest-tracked armored fighting vehicle of the war at 55 miles per hour. Its 76mm high-velocity gun penetrated German armor at range, while minimal 13mm armor meant survival depended on speed. Over 2,500 were produced. The M36 Jackson mounted the powerful 90mm gun capable of defeating any German tank frontally. Introduced in 1944 on an improved M10 chassis, it provided desperately needed heavy firepower. Over 2,300 were produced, proving highly effective through the war's final campaigns. Next, we examine self-propelled artillery. The M7 Priest mounted a 105mm howitzer on an M3 medium tank chassis. Named for its pulpit-like machine gun ring, it entered service in 1942 for close artillery support. Over 4,300 were built, serving with American and British forces across all theaters. The M8 Scott provided close fire support by mounting a 75mm howitzer in a modified M5 light tank turret. Weighing 16 tons, it accompanied armored infantry formations throughout the war. Over 1,700 were produced from 1942 until replaced by larger calibers. The M12 gun motor carriage mounted the massive 155mm gun on an M3 tank chassis. Despite using World War I-era guns, it delivered devastating heavy bombardment. Only 100 were converted, seeing extensive action from Normandy through the final drive into Germany. The M40 gun motor carriage replaced the M12 with a modern 155mm gun on an M4 Sherman chassis. Entering service in early 1945, its improved gun offered greater range and accuracy. Approximately 420 were produced, proving highly effective in final European operations. The M37 howitzer motor carriage mounted a 105mm howitzer on the M24 Chaffee chassis. Designed for airborne divisions needing mobile artillery support, it arrived too late for significant wartime combat. Approximately 300 were produced before hostilities ended. Let's turn to anti-aircraft vehicles. The M15 combination gun motor carriage mounted a 37mm cannon with twin .50 caliber machine guns on an M3 half-track chassis. Entering service in 1943, it provided combined anti-aircraft and ground fire capability. Over 2,300 were produced for convoy protection. The M16 multiple gun motor carriage mounted the famous quad .50 caliber Maxim turret on an M3 half-track. 4 synchronized heavy machine guns delivered devastating firepower against aircraft and soft targets. Over 2,800 were produced, with crews praising its effectiveness for ground support. The M17 mounted the quad .50 caliber turret on the International Harvester M5 half-track chassis for Lend-Lease supply. Primarily sent to Soviet forces, over 1,000 were produced. The Soviets employed them effectively against both aircraft and infantry concentrations. The M19 gun motor carriage mounted twin 40mm Bofors guns on an M24 Chaffee chassis. Introduced in early 1945, it provided heavier anti-aircraft firepower than half-track systems. Approximately 285 were produced, seeing limited combat before the war concluded. Moving on to armored cars and reconnaissance vehicles. The M8 Greyhound was America's primary armored car, combining speed with a 37mm gun in a fully rotating turret. Weighing 8 tons on 6 wheels, it reached 55 miles per hour on roads. Over 8,500 were produced for reconnaissance duties. The M20 armored utility car removed the M8 Greyhound's turret to create a command and scout vehicle. Armed only with a ring-mounted .50 caliber machine gun, it carried additional crew and communications equipment. Over 3,700 were built for headquarters units. The M3A1 Scout car was a 4-wheeled armored vehicle entering service in 1939. Armed with .50 and .30 caliber machine guns behind armored shields, it served for reconnaissance and personnel transport. Over 20,500 were produced, many supplied through Lend-Lease to allies. Continuing with half-track personnel carriers. The M2 half-track was designed primarily as an artillery prime mover and reconnaissance vehicle. Lighter than the M3 with seating for 10 men, it towed anti-tank guns and howitzers effectively. Over 13,500 were produced from 1941, serving throughout all combat theaters. The M3 half-track became the standard American armored personnel carrier, transporting 13 infantrymen into battle. Protected by armor against small arms fire, it mounted multiple machine guns for suppressive fire. Over 41,000 were produced. D, becoming the most numerous Allied half-track. The M5 half-track was manufactured by International Harvester with a different hull design than the M3. Functionally equivalent with seating for 13 troops, it was produced alongside white-built M3s. Over 4,600 were built, primarily for Lend-Lease supply. The M4 mortar carrier mounted an 81mm mortar in a modified M2 half-track for mobile indirect fire. The mortar could fire from the vehicle or be dismounted for ground use. Over 570 were produced, supporting armored infantry formations. The M21 mortar carrier replaced the M4 with improved design, mounting an 81mm mortar in an M3 half-track. Featuring better crew protection and increased ammunition stowage, over 1,800 were produced. It remained standard equipment through 1945. Next, we examine utility and light vehicles. The Willys MB Jeep became the iconic American military vehicle, performing countless roles from reconnaissance to ambulance duty. Weighing 2,400 pounds with a 60-horsepower engine, its remarkable cross-country capability made it indispensable. Over 360,000 Willys Jeeps were produced during the war. The Ford GPW was Ford's licensed production of the Willys Jeep design under wartime manufacturing agreements. Nearly identical to the MB except for minor component differences, Ford produced approximately 280,000 units. Combined with Willys production, over 640,000 Jeeps served worldwide. The Dodge WC-51 and WC-52 were 3/4-ton trucks serving as weapons carriers and personnel transports across all theaters. The WC-52 added a front-mounted winch capability. Over 250,000 combined were produced, becoming essential light utility workhorses. The Dodge WC-54 ambulance was the standard American field ambulance, carrying 4-liter patients or 7 seated casualties simultaneously. Based on the reliable 3/4-ton chassis, over 26,000 were produced to evacuate wounded from forward areas. The Dodge WC-56 and WC-57 served as command and reconnaissance cars featuring open bodies with canvas tops. Often armed with pintle-mounted machine guns, they transported officers and radio equipment effectively. Over 22,000 combined were manufactured throughout the war. Moving on to cargo trucks. The GMC CCKW 2.5-ton truck was the legendary deuce and a half that moved the American Army. Capable of hauling 5,000 pounds of cargo across any terrain, its 6-wheel drive proved unstoppable. Over 560,000 were produced, forming Allied logistics backbone. The Studebaker US-6 2.5-ton truck was primarily supplied through Lend-Lease to Soviet forces. Over 200,000 were produced, with Soviets mounting Katyusha rocket launchers on many examples. Its rugged reliability made it highly valued on the Eastern Front. The Diamond T models 980 and 981 were heavy tank transporters capable of hauling loads exceeding 40 tons. The powerful 12-ton capacity tractors pulled specialized trailers carrying tanks from factories to ports. Over 6,500 were produced for heavy logistics. The International M5H6 was a heavy 6-ton cargo truck handling loads beyond CCKW capacity. Over 6,000 were produced for transporting heavy equipment, bridging materials, and construction supplies. Its robust construction handled demanding rear area logistics requirements effectively. Let's turn to amphibious vehicles. The DUKW, nicknamed the Duck, was an amphibious truck based on the GMC CCKW chassis with waterproofed hull. Carrying 25 troops or 5,000 pounds from ship to shore, it revolutionized amphibious logistics operations. Over 21,000 were produced. The LVT-1 Alligator was the first production landing vehicle tracked. Originally designed for Florida swamp rescue operations, the military adapted it for amphibious assault. Over 1,200 were built, though thin armor and lack of a ramp limited effectiveness. The LVT-2 Water Buffalo improved on the original with more powerful engine and better seakeeping characteristics. Entering service in 1943, it carried 24 troops or 6,500 pounds of cargo through surf. Over 2,900 were produced for Pacific Island assaults. The LVT-4 introduced a revolutionary rear ramp allowing vehicles and artillery to drive directly off the craft. This feature dramatically improved unloading speed on contested beaches under enemy fire. Over 8,300 were produced, becoming the standard assault amphibian. The LVT-A1 was an armored fire support version mounting an M3 Stuart turret with 37mm gun for beach suppression. Sacrificing cargo capacity for firepower, it engaged defensive positions during landings. Over 500 were produced for Pacific amphibious operations. The LVT-A4 mounted a 75mm howitzer turret providing heavier fire support during amphibious assaults. Its open-top turret allowed high-angle fire against fortified cliff positions. Over 1,800 were produced, delivering crucial artillery support during contested island landings. The M29 Weasel was a light-tracked cargo carrier designed for snow and swamp conditions impassable to wheeled vehicles. Weighing only 2.5 tons, it traversed extreme terrain reliably. Over 15,000 were produced, serving in Pacific jungles and European mud equally. The Ford GPA, nicknamed the Seep, was an amphibious jeep capable of fording rivers and coastal waters. Limited freeboard and poor seakeeping restricted practical utility significantly. Over 12,500 were produced, with most supplied to Soviet forces through Lend-Lease. Continuing with specialized recovery and engineering vehicles. The M31 tank recovery vehicle converted obsolete M3 Lee tanks into armored recovery platforms. Equipped with crane and winch for recovering disabled vehicles under fire, approximately 800 were converted to maintain armored unit operational strength. The M32 tank recovery vehicle utilized Sherman tank chassis with 81mm mortar for smoke screen generation. Heavy-duty winch and boom recovered knocked-out tanks from battlefields efficiently. Over 1,500 were converted from Sherman hulls throughout the war. The M1 dozer blade kit converted standard Sherman tanks into armored bulldozers for combat engineering missions. Essential for clearing obstacles, filling craters, and creating fighting positions, these field-modified vehicles proved invaluable during Normandy hedgerow fighting and Pacific jungle operations. The M4 high-speed tractor was a fully tracked prime mover for heavy artillery pieces. Capable of towing guns up to 155mm across rough terrain at speed, over 5,500 were produced. Its armored cab protected crews during forward deployment. The M5 high-speed tractor served as a lighter prime mover built on modified M3 light tank chassis. Towing 105mm howitzers and similar medium artillery pieces, over 5,000 were produced for artillery battalion support operations. Finally, we examine military motorcycles. The Harley-Davidson WLA was the standard American military motorcycle throughout the war. Its reliable 45 cubic inch V-twin engine proved dependable for courier, escort, and military police duties. Over 88,000 were produced, with many supplied to Allied forces. The Indian 841 was designed specifically for desert warfare, with its transverse V-twin engine configuration providing improved cooling. Though only approximately 1,000 were produced, most served in training rather than combat. Its design influenced post-war motorcycle development significantly. From the smallest Jeep to the heaviest Pershing, American vehicles demonstrated the industrial might that ultimately decided World War II. These machines transported millions of soldiers, delivered countless tons of supplies, and engaged enemy forces across 3 continents simultaneously. The remarkable combination of reliable standardized designs, unprecedented mass production, and effective logistics networks created an unstoppable arsenal that overwhelmed Axis forces through both quantity and consistent quality. This comprehensive catalog captures the extraordinary scope of American vehicular power that rolled toward victory from 1941 to 1945.